They poured Coca-Cola on the canine German Shepherd. His millionaire owner walked in and got revenge on everyone. He was more than just a dog. He was a loyal companion, a protector, and a hero. But that didn't stop the cruel ones from humiliating him. They laughed as they poured soda over his head, thinking no one would ever stand up for him. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, the door swung open, and his owner, one of the most powerful men in the city, stepped in. What happened next left everyone speechless and changed that canine's life forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This is a story of loyalty, justice, and a bond that nothing could break. It was a rainy afternoon in New York City when Rex, a retired canine German Shepherd, followed his caretaker, James Callahan, into the massive marble lobby of the Titan Financial Tower. At first glance, no one would suspect the towering silver-haired billionaire was the kind of man who kept a dog at his side. But Rex wasn't just any dog. He had served beside James during his military years, saving lives, surviving battles, and forming a bond that was unbreakable. Now retired, Rex struggled with a slight limp from an old injury, a memory of his last mission overseas. Despite that, his posture remained proud, his amber eyes alert. Wherever James went, Rex followed, his head held high, his loyalty written in every careful step. That day, James had left Rex briefly in the care of his personal assistant, Daniel, while he handled a high-stakes negotiation on the top floor. What James didn't know was that not everyone in his luxurious world shared the same respect for loyalty and sacrifice. As Rex sat obediently near the lobby's towering glass windows, a group of young executives, spoiled heirs to wealth they never earned, gathered nearby. They sneered at the old dog, laughing cruelly as they sipped expensive drinks and exchanged stories of their latest conquests. "Look at this washed-up mutt," one of them sneered. "Probably only good for a museum at this point." Another pulled a fresh can of Coca-Cola from a bag and smirked. "Bet he's never had a real taste of city life. What do you say we show him?" Before anyone could stop them, the man popped the can open, walked up to Rex, and poured the sticky, dark liquid right over his head. Rex didn't flinch. He sat still, his eyes calm, but filled with a quiet dignity that only those who have seen real hardship can carry. But inside, his heart ached, not from the humiliation, but from the memories. Memories of standing proudly beside James in the line of duty, and now being reduced to this moment of cruelty. The lobby echoed with laughter as the soda dripped from his fur, pooling around his paws. But then, the laughter stopped. The massive double doors of the executive elevator slid open with a sharp ding, and James Callahan stepped out. His tailored suit couldn't hide the soldier still living under his polished exterior. His eyes scanned the scene, falling instantly on Rex. Drenched in soda, his once pristine fur stained and sticky. The room went dead silent. James walked forward, each step deliberate, his gaze locked on the young men responsible. His voice, calm but ice-cold, cut through the thick silence. "Which one of you," he said slowly, "thought it was wise to disrespect a decorated war hero in my building?" No one dared to answer. James crouched beside Rex, his hand gently wiping the soda from the old dog's face. His touch was soft, his voice low as he spoke to his loyal companion. "I'm sorry, old friend. Some people forget what real honor looks like." Then he stood, his expression hard as steel. "You're all fired," he said flatly, looking directly at the group of executives. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. And believe me when I say, you'll never work in this city again." The young men stammered, their faces pale. "Mr. Callahan, please." "Save it." James cut them off. "You're not just an embarrassment to this company, you're an embarrassment to yourselves. Now get out." As security moved in, James turned his attention back to Rex. He removed his tailored jacket and wrapped it gently around the dog's shoulders before leading him out of the building. Outside, the rain washed away the last of the sticky mess, and for the first time that day, Rex lifted his head higher, his old pride restored. But what James did next would prove that justice wasn't finished just yet. The storm outside roared as James Callahan stepped into his black armored SUV with Rex by his side. His knuckles tightened against the leather steering wheel. His jaw clenched so hard his temples ached. Through the rearview mirror, he caught sight of Rex resting his head on the armrest, eyes half closed, utterly exhausted. The old warrior had seen worse in life, but this kind of humiliation was something James couldn't let stand. His mind was already racing through everything he could do, and with the power and influence he held, his options were endless. James wasn't a man to make empty threats, and when he'd said those young executives would never work in this city again, he meant every word. But before vengeance, there was something far more important to him: restoring the dignity of the one companion who had never abandoned him. "Let's get you cleaned up, buddy," James whispered, reaching over to gently scratch behind Rex's ears. Rex let out a low, contented sigh, his tail giving a weak thump against the seat. Instead of heading home, James drove straight to the most luxurious pet spa in the city. The moment he walked through the door, the staff, already recognizing the billionaire, snapped to attention. But James wasn't interested in their usual marketing charm. He pointed to Rex. "He gets the best treatment you've ever given a dog in your lives. And I mean best, not what's listed on your premium packages. I want everything custom. Special shampoos, medical checkups, deep tissue massages, whatever it takes to make him feel like a king again." The staff nodded hurriedly, gathering around Rex with warm towels and gentle hands. But before they took him to the treatment area, James crouched down in front of him again, his eyes softening. "You remember who you are, Rex," he murmured. "You're not just a dog. You're my brother in arms. You've saved lives, crossed deserts, stood fearless in the face of danger, and no spoiled-a-punk pouring soda on you can ever take that away." Rex nuzzled into his hand, his wet nose all against James's palm. As Rex was led away to be pampered like the hero he was, James stepped outside and pulled out his phone. He wasn't just going to fire those young men, he was going to make an example out of them. One by one, he made the calls. First, to the heads of rival corporations, informing them exactly why those young men should never be hired again. Then, to every luxury brand they flaunted, revoking their VIP memberships and accounts. Within hours, their elite credit cards were canceled. Their luxury apartments? Lease agreements terminated. James had financial interests in nearly every high-end real estate development in the city. By nightfall, those men who had laughed so cruelly at an old injured dog found themselves locked out of their expensive lives, their reputations shattered. But James wasn't done yet. The next morning, every major business news outlet in New York carried the story. Billionaire James Callahan defends his decorated canine companion against corporate cruelty. The story went viral, a symbol of loyalty and justice. Social media lit up with support, and thousands shared their own stories of loyal dogs and the sacrifices they'd made. When James went to pick up Rexy later that day, he found his old friend looking like royalty. His fur shining, his eyes bright, his steps stronger despite the limp. "You clean up well, soldier," James said with a proud smile, gently placing his hand on Rex's broad back. But the moment that truly brought tears to James's eyes came as they walked back out to the SUV. For the first time in years, Rex paused at the door, turned back toward James, and let out a single sharp bark. A sound James hadn't heard since their last mission overseas. It wasn't just a bark. It was a statement. Rex was back. And deep down, James knew. This was only the beginning of their fight to prove that loyalty and courage always win, no matter the odds. The news about James Callahan and his loyal canine companion Rex spread across the country like wildfire. Overnight, they became a symbol of unshakable loyalty and justice. Talk shows debated the story. Social media platforms flooded with hashtags like "A Justice for Rex" and "Asha Real, Heroes Wear Fur," and offers poured in for interviews and exclusive features. But for James, none of that mattered. His only concern was making sure Rex felt like the hero he'd always been. Despite his age and limp, Rex seemed to walk taller now. His eyes were brighter, his ears perked up at the sound of James's voice, and something that had long been dormant stirred back to life in him, the spirit of a warrior. One evening, just days after the incident, James stood on the balcony of his penthouse, gazing out at the city lights. Rex sat beside him, his head resting against James's leg. "You know, buddy," James began, his voice thoughtful, "all those people asking for interviews, wanting to turn this into some headline, but none of them understand what this is really about." Rex looked up at him, his tail wagging softly. "It's not about revenge," James continued. "It's about respect. About never letting anyone forget the sacrifices made by those who can't speak for themselves." As if on cue, James's phone buzzed on the balcony table. It was a call from General Matthews, an old military contact, and a man James deeply respected. "James." The general's voice came through strong and clear. "I saw the news, and I have to say, what you did took guts. Reminded a lot of us why we fought in the first place." "Appreciate that, General," James replied humbly. "Listen," Matthews continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I have a proposal for you and that remarkable dog of yours. There's a new rehabilitation center for retired canine units and service animals being built outside of Arlington. They're looking for someone to help shape its mission, someone who understands the bond between man and dog better than anyone." James glanced down at Rex, who was now sitting alert, sensing the energy shift. "I'm not sure I'm the right man for the job," James admitted, his voice low. "With all due respect, James, if you're not the right man, no one is," the general replied firmly. "These animals deserve a place to live out their final years with dignity. And I think you and Rex could show the world exactly what that looks like." For the first time in days, James felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. The next morning, he packed a bag, loaded Rex into the SUV, and drove out toward Arlington. The facility wasn't finished yet, just a skeleton of what it would become. But even in its incomplete state, James saw the potential. Wide open fields for the dogs to run freely, peaceful shaded areas for them to rest, and specialized therapy centers to help them recover from years of service. Standing in the middle of that open land with the wind whipping around them, James knelt beside Rex and looked him in the eyes. "What do you say, old friend?" he whispered. "One last mission?" Rex let out a low bark, his tail thumping against the grass, as if to say, "I'm ready." And just like that, a new chapter began, not one driven by revenge, but by redemption. They would build a haven for heroes, not the kind who wore medals on their chests, but the ones who bore their scars silently and had served with unwavering loyalty. Together they would make sure that no hero, man or dog, was ever forgotten again. Construction on the new Canine Rehabilitation Center began faster than anyone expected. With James Callahan backing the project, there were no bureaucratic delays, no budget excuses, only action. Within weeks, the dusty patch of land near Arlington had transformed into something extraordinary. A place built not for profit, but for purpose. And right at the heart of it was Rex. Though he was older now, with silver spreading across his muzzle and a limp that never quite faded, Rex became the soul of the place. The workers adored him. Visitors stopped in their tracks just to meet the dog they had seen in the headlines. But it wasn't the fame that mattered. It was what Rex represented. He was the man who endured cruelty without complaint, the veteran who served with courage and never asked for anything in return. And now, he was the reason other dogs would have a second chance. Every day, James walked the grounds with Rex by his side, overseeing every detail. Specialized pools for hydrotherapy, quiet gardens where the dogs could relax, and training areas for those still eager to work. But it wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about restoring dignity. Still, not everyone was pleased with the center's rising fame. One afternoon, as James was reviewing designs for the upcoming veterinary clinic, his assistant rushed into the office with a concerned expression. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed over a local newspaper. The headline read, "Former execs sue James Callahan for defamation after viral dog incident." James scanned the article quickly. The same men who had humiliated Rex were now trying to fight back, claiming the story had been exaggerated and their careers unfairly ruined. They were demanding compensation and a public apology. James chuckled, shaking his head. They couldn't destroy the dog, so now they want to destroy the story. His smile faded as he looked down at Rex, who was resting nearby in the sun. "We're not backing down, buddy. They don't get to rewrite the truth." Later that evening, James held a press conference right outside the nearly completed main building of the center. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed. But he didn't speak like a CEO. He spoke like a soldier. "I didn't build this center to go viral. I built it because heroes like Rex deserve better than what the world gives them when their service ends. This isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. Those who mock loyalty and sacrifice don't get to hide behind legal threats. Let them sue. We'll keep building." The applause was immediate, thunderous. And the lawsuit quietly dropped 2 weeks later. But the moment that truly shook James happened shortly after, when the first dog was officially admitted into the program. Her name was Luna, a 5-year-old German Shepherd who had lost a leg in a roadside bombing overseas. Her military handler had passed away, and she had been passed from shelter to shelter, aggressive and terrified, until someone contacted James's team. The moment she arrived, something stirred in Rex. He walked straight to her crate, stood tall, and let out a soft whine. Luna looked up, wary, trembling, until Rex lay down beside the crate and pressed his nose gently to the bars. Within minutes, Luna stopped shaking. It was like she knew. She wasn't alone anymore. And James, watching from a distance with his arms crossed and heart full, realized this place was already becoming what he had hoped. Not just a sanctuary, a family. News of the sanctuary's success began to spread beyond state lines. Veterans, law enforcement agencies, and even ordinary families from across the country reached out, asking how they could support or visit. But James didn't want this to become a tourist attraction or a photo opportunity for celebrities looking to boost their public image. This was sacred ground. One crisp autumn morning, James stood at the entrance of the sanctuary, watching as a convoy of military vehicles approached. Today was special. A group of recently retired military working dogs were arriving, their handlers unable to keep them due to deployment rotations, or, in heartbreaking cases, because they'd made the ultimate sacrifice. Among the new arrivals was a canine named Shadow. Shadow had a reputation, legendary among military circles. He was known for detecting explosives under impossible conditions and for saving the lives of an entire convoy overseas. But when Shadow arrived at the sanctuary, he was a shadow of the hero he'd once been. His fur was thin, his eyes dull, and he walked with the careful hesitation of a dog who had lost his place in the world. As the handlers unloaded him, Rex stood at the gate. Even in his old age, There was a quiet authority in the way he held himself. He approached Shadow slowly, their noses touching briefly, a silent exchange passing between them. James watched the interaction closely, his heart heavy. "Another soul looking for home," he murmured under his breath. Shadow wasn't easy. The first few days, he refused to eat unless left completely alone. He wouldn't let anyone touch him, not even the trained therapists James had hired. His nights were worse, filled with whimpers and sudden howls that echoed painfully across the sanctuary grounds. But Rex never left his side. Day after day, the old warrior simply sat with Shadow under the shade of the tall oak trees. He didn't push, didn't demand affection or obedience. He just was there. And slowly, something incredible happened. Shadow began to eat again. First small bites, then full meals. His tail, which had remained low and motionless, started to twitch when he saw Rex approaching, and one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in strokes of orange and pink, Shadow did something no one expected. He curled up beside Rex and rested his head on the old dog's shoulder. It was the first peaceful sleep Shadow had found in months. James stood nearby, his eyes moist with emotion. "You're still doing the work, aren't you, old friend?" he whispered to Rex, "teaching these young ones how to heal." But the sanctuary's mission wasn't without its challenges. That week, James received a troubling phone call from the project's financial officer. Despite all the media attention, donations had begun to slow. The cost of maintaining the sanctuary, with its specialized veterinary care, therapies, and highly trained staff, was far greater than anyone had anticipated. "We're burning through reserves faster than projected," the officer admitted. "If something doesn't change soon, we'll be forced to cut back on new admissions." James hung up the phone with a heavy heart. He'd poured his personal fortune into this project, but even a billionaire's resources weren't infinite. He wasn't worried about himself. He had more than enough, but he couldn't bear the thought of turning away even one more dog in need. That night, sitting by the fireplace with Rex asleep at his feet, James came to a decision. "If this place means something," he said aloud, looking into the flickering flames, "then it's time to show the world what sacrifice really looks like." He picked up his phone and dialed the one contact who could help make his next plan a reality: General Matthews. "General," James began, his voice steady, "I think it's time we take this mission national, and I'm prepared to put everything I have on the line to do it." The following weeks became a whirlwind of planning, negotiations, and public appearances. James Callahan, who had spent most of his life avoiding the spotlight, now stood front and center in a nationwide campaign to secure the future of the sanctuary. With General Matthews by his side, they launched the Final Salute Initiative, a program aimed at building rehabilitation centers for retired canine heroes across the country, modeled after the sanctuary James had created with Rex. But more than that, it was a call to every American to recognize and honor the silent sacrifices made by these incredible animals. The first step was a live televised charity event. James had initially resisted the idea, but when he saw the financial reports again, how dangerously close they were to having to turn dogs away, he knew there was no other choice. The night of the event, a grand auditorium in Washington, D.C., filled with people from all walks of life: celebrities, military veterans, politicians, and ordinary families who had been touched by the loyalty of a dog gathered for one cause. But the moment that stole everyone's breath was when James walked onto the stage, not alone, but with Rex and Shadow at his side. Rex, despite his age and frailty, walked proudly under the bright lights. His silver muzzle shone under the spotlight, and even with his limp, his head was held high. Shadow, younger and stronger now after weeks of care, walked closely beside him like a protective son escorting his aging father. The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation before James even spoke a word. When the room fell silent, James stepped to the microphone, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, glancing down at Rex, "this is what loyalty looks like. This old soldier beside me stood by my side through the worst moments of my life. He never asked for anything. He never turned away when things got hard. And when his service was over, he didn't fade into the background. He kept on giving, teaching younger dogs how to heal, how to trust again." James's voice broke slightly as he placed a trembling hand on Rex's head. "These animals aren't just dogs. They are heroes. They carried our burdens into battle, saved lives under enemy fire, and suffered quietly when their time of service was done. And yet, far too many spend their final days forgotten, abandoned, or worse, euthanized because no one has a place for them." The room was silent, but for the soft sniffles of audience members moved to tears. "That ends now," James declared, his voice growing stronger. "Tonight, we stand together to ensure that no hero, whether on 2 legs or 4, will ever be forgotten again. With your help, the Final Salute initiative will build sanctuaries like this one across the nation, giving every retired service dog the life they've earned. A life of peace, dignity, and love." As the donation lines opened and screens lit up with pledges pouring in, James knelt beside Rex and whispered, "We did it, old friend. You've started something that will outlive us both." Rex leaned against him, his eyes closing peacefully, his body tired, but his spirit finally at rest. The next morning, as the sun rose over the sanctuary, a quiet calm settled over the grounds. Rex lay in his favorite spot beneath the old oak tree, the place where he had comforted so many others. His breathing was slow and steady, his chest rising and falling with the ease of a life well lived. James sat with him for hours, his hand resting gently over Rex's heart. And when the time came, when Rex took his final breath under the golden morning light, James didn't cry out or break down. Instead, he pressed his forehead to Rex's and whispered, "Rest now, soldier. Mission complete." Across the sanctuary, a bell tolled gently. One final salute to a hero who had given his all. And as the sound echoed across the hills, James stood tall, looking out over the land that would forever carry Rex's legacy. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. The sanctuary felt quieter after Rex's passing, but his presence remained in every corner of the land. The old oak tree, where he took his final breath, became a sacred place. A bronze plaque was placed beneath its wide-reaching branches, engraved with simple but powerful words. Rex, loyal soldier, unbreakable spirit, forever in our hearts. For James Callahan, every day after that felt like a mission to honor not just Rex, but every dog who had given their life in service. And with the success of the Final Salute initiative, that mission had spread far beyond the rolling hills of the sanctuary. Within 6 months, new sanctuaries were under construction across the country. California, Texas, Florida, and Virginia had each broken ground on state-of-the-art facilities. And it wasn't just about providing shelter. Each sanctuary was designed to give these heroes the peaceful retirement they deserved. Advanced medical care, wide-open spaces to roam, and above all, human companions who understood their silent stories of bravery and loss. Shadow had become a new symbol of the sanctuary's mission. Strong, proud, and once broken by war, he now walked the grounds as a guardian for the younger rescues, teaching them what Rex had taught him. His transformation from a frightened, hollow-eyed dog to a leader was nothing short of miraculous. James often watched Shadow from the balcony of the main hall, remembering the exact moment when Rex had passed the torch, without words, without ceremony, just a quiet understanding between two warriors. One chilly spring morning, James prepared for the biggest event the sanctuary had ever hosted, the National Day of Honor for Retired Canine Heroes. Veterans and families from every corner of the nation arrived to pay tribute. Rows of white flags, each bearing the name of a fallen or retired service dog, lined the sanctuary's pathways. Some flags fluttered gently in the breeze for those who had passed. Others stood proudly to represent dogs still living out their golden years on the sanctuary grounds. As the sun reached its peak, James stood before the gathering crowd, Shadow sitting loyally at his side. "This isn't just a tribute to our beloved animals," James began, his voice strong despite the lump in his throat. "It's a reminder that loyalty doesn't fade with time, that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and that some of the bravest souls this nation has ever known walked on 4 legs, carrying our burdens without complaint." He paused, his gaze traveling across the crowd. Some people wiped away tears. Others stood tall, hands over their hearts, paying silent respect. James continued, his voice softening. "My dearest friend Rex taught me that heroism isn't measured by medals or parades. It's measured by quiet acts of sacrifice, by unwavering loyalty, even when the world turns its back on you. He stood by me through the darkest moments of my life. And when he was gone, he left behind something far greater than a memory. He left a legacy." With a signal, a group of children released a dozen white doves into the sky. The crowd looked up as the birds soared over the sanctuary, a living symbol of freedom and peace. James knelt beside Shadow, brushing his fingers through the thick fur of his trusted companion. "You ready for this, boy?" he whispered. Shadow gave a soft bark, his eyes bright, standing tall just like Rex had done. As the ceremony ended, families stayed behind, walking the grounds, reading the plaques, and meeting the retired heroes. And in every corner, you could hear the soft jingle of collars, see wagging tails, and feel the quiet peace that settled over this sacred place. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, James walked to the old oak tree. He sat beneath it, just as he had so many times before, looking out over the sanctuary that now stood as a living testament to the bond between man and dog. "You did good, old friend," he said softly, glancing up at the stars as they began to appear. "Your mission is complete, but ours, it's only just beginning." And as the first star appeared above the horizon, James felt a soft breeze stir the branches overhead. Somewhere, somehow, he knew Rex was still standing watch. Months passed, but the spirit of that final ceremony lingered like a gentle heartbeat across the sanctuary grounds. Where once there had been empty fields and forgotten stories, now there was life, hope, and a future built on loyalty and love. Veterans who once struggled with their own scars of war now volunteered at the sanctuary, finding comfort in the silent understanding of the bungs who walked beside them. Children learned lessons of compassion and bravery simply by sitting under the old oak tree listening to stories about Rex and the heroes who came before him. But the true legacy was only just beginning. With the overwhelming success of the Final Salute initiative, James Callahan received a call that he never expected, an official invitation from the United States Congress. The proposal was simple, yet historic, to designate an official national holiday honoring K-9 service members across all branches of military and law enforcement. A day where the country would stop and remember the sacrifices made by these silent guardians. The legislation passed unanimously. April 15th was officially named National K-9 Heroes Day, a date that would forever honor the memory of Rex, the day he took his final peaceful breath under the old oak tree. James stood at the Capitol on the first official observance of the holiday. He wore a simple black suit, but on his chest was pinned the only medal that truly mattered to him, a small gold tag engraved with the name Rex. Shadow stood by his side, calm and poised, his presence every bit as commanding as the legendary dog who'd mentored him. As James took the podium, cameras broadcasted the event across every major network. His voice was calm, his words heartfelt. Today is more than a remembrance, he began. It's a promise that we will never again forget those who gave everything and asked for nothing. These heroes, our canine soldiers, our protectors, walked into danger without hesitation. They carried our hopes and shielded our lives. And when their service ended, we must ensure their dignity begins. He paused, his eyes traveling across the thousands gathered in the National Mall, many holding framed photos of their own canine companions. In their eyes, he continued, we find a reflection of the very best parts of ourselves: loyalty, bravery, unconditional love. If we can learn to live with even half the honor of these heroes, the world would be a better place. When the speech ended, the sound of a ceremonial bell echoed across the city, one chime for every fallen canine hero. And as the final bell rang, a formation of retired service dogs led a silent procession through the heart of Washington, D.C., with Shadow at the front of the line, his head held high. Back at the sanctuary that evening, James returned to his usual place under the old oak tree. The sun dipped low over the hills, casting golden light across the sprawling grounds. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the original leather collar Rex had worn during their last mission together. Worn and faded, but still whole. He placed it gently at the base of the tree. "You kept your promise, old friend," he whispered. "Now it's my turn to keep mine." Shadow settled beside him, his body warm against James's side. The breeze stirred the branches above, and for a brief moment, James could almost hear the faint sound of footsteps in the grass. Like Rex was still there, keeping watch, and in that peaceful silence, James knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a legacy that would live forever.